Hello there, welcome to Wake Up to the Bible. I'm Daniel Kaplan. I'm here with my father, Dr. Kaplan, and together we are going through the books of the Bible, Genesis through Deuteronomy, doing a little bit every day. Today we're going to read the Genesis chapter 40, and that will end this week's portion. And I'll be reading from the Robert Alter translation. And it happened after these things that the cupbearer of the king of Egypt and his baker gave offense to their lord the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was furious with his two courtiers, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and he put them under guard in the house of the high chamberlain, the prison house, the place where Joseph was held. And the high chamberlain assigned Joseph to them, and he ministered to them, and they stayed a good while under guard. And the two of them dreamed a dream, each his own dream, on a single night, each a dream with its own solution, the cupbearer and the baker to the king of Egypt, who were held in the prison house. And Joseph came to them in the morning and saw them, and look, they were frowning. And he asked Pharaoh's courtiers who were with him under guard in his lord's house, saying, "Why are your faces downcast today?" And they said to him, "We dreamed a dream, and there is no one to solve it." And Joseph said to them, "Are not solutions from God? Pray, recount them to me." And the chief cupbearer recounted his dream to Joseph, and said to him, "In my dream, and look, a vine was before me, and on the vine were three tendrils, and as it was budding, its blossom shot up, its clusters ripened to grapes. And Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and crushed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I placed the cup in Pharaoh's palm." And Joseph said, "This is the solution. The three tendrils are 3 days. 3 days hence Pharaoh will lift up your head and will restore you to your place, and you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, as you used to do when you were his cupbearer. But if you remember I was with you once it goes well for you, do me the kindness, pray, to mention me to Pharaoh and bring me out of the house. For indeed I was stolen from the land of the Hebrews, and here too I have done nothing that I should have been put in the pit." And the chief baker saw that he had solved well, and he said to Joseph, "I too in my dream, and look, there were 3 open work baskets on my head. And in the topmost were all sorts of food for Pharaoh, baker's ware, and birds were eating from the basket over my head." And Joseph answered and said, "This is its solution. For the 3 baskets are 3 days. 3 days hence Pharaoh will lift up your head from upon you and impale you on a pole, and the birds will eat your flesh from upon you." And it happened on the 3rd day, Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast for all his servants. And he lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer and the head of the chief baker in the midst of his servants. And he restored the chief cupbearer to his cupbearing, and he put the cup in Pharaoh's hand, and the chief baker he impaled, just as Joseph had solved for them. But the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph. No, he forgot him. Dun, dun, dun. Well, this is chapter 40. And as I said yesterday, the best song in Joseph and the Amazing Color Dream, Go Go Joseph. Now, I will say one thing that story gets a little bit wrong is he says, when he's talking about the dreams, he says, "Don't believe that all I said I saw. It's just that I've never been wrong before," which is not only a very bad rhyme, saw and for, but technically Joseph doesn't know that any of his dreams have come to pass yet, and so it's a little weird. But I think one thing is it's trying to get at, like, Joseph was an interpreter, but this is really the first time that Joseph has tried to interpret any of his dreams, because the other time his brothers did it for him, right? So it's kind of interesting. Because all of a sudden he's like, "Don't interpretations come from God?" And he just starts going. But he's never done this before.
Well, I think that the implication was that the, that he mentioned the dreams to them,
Mm-hmm.
and they drew the conclusion that he also drew.
Mm-hmm.
And, he didn't have to tell them what it meant because they got the point. Both times.
Right.
So it very likely was he did interpret them.
Mm.
And he made sure later that they were fulfilled. It was a self-fulfilling prophecy in the sense that once the brothers were there,
Right.
well, I guess in one sense it wasn't self-fulfilling because he was there and they bowed to him,
Yeah.
but then his father came and bowed to him too. And presumably, was Leah there at that point? Was she still alive? So theoretically, then she would have bowed as well. They have
Now,
to check that out.
I
Because,
will have to check that out. That's interesting. Now, here's one thing, though, you could say. Let's say you want to say that he did have prior experience because maybe he did interpret the dreams before, and that's just
it's not
delete. That's
mentioned.
just not mentioned. Possible.
Now, I would have to say, Yosef HaTzadik, here is a person but basically a righteous person, a good person, maybe a bit of a snitch or whatever, however you want to describe him, or a bit naive, or he made some unwise decisions. Well, so does everybody. Nobody's perfect. But here's the point: this is basically a righteous man, a good man, and yet he keeps getting into trouble. But yet he has this faith in God that evidently had come from his grandfather Isaac, his father Jacob, because Isaac was alive during Joseph's youth, and then of course Jacob had been with him till he was sold. So and he has this faith in God throughout all of this, uh, and I think he could see God's hand in the fact that they didn't kill him; they sold him.
Right.
He became a slave, but he became a VIP.
Yeah.
Then he becomes a
He
prisoner,
got a lot of reassurance
but
along the way,
right,
even
VIP.
with yeah, over and over again something bad happens, but almost immediately the situation gets better.
And also, he doesn't say,
I know some people make a big deal about, wow, Joseph had to have so much faith because he was put through the ringer, and I'm not undermining his
right,
faith,
right,
but he was given a lot of reassurance along the way
right.
because it could have been this and it's a little bit less bad, and it could have been this and a little bit less bad, and and quite a bit less bad, you know.
But
It's
and
one reason why I really hate when people want to draw parallels to people. Like sometimes people will talk about how bad their life is and like, well, just remember Joseph. And it's like, what do you mean? I mean, yes, he was sold into slavery, but then he was a VIP in the house. Okay, and then yes, he went to the jail, but then he was promoted to the head of the jail. Like, very rarely is Joseph ever that in that bad of a spot for very long. Which makes it very clear to him that he's going to go places, right? If every time you turn around, you're like finding yourself getting escalated, and you had the dreams, by the way, at the very beginning of your life that you believed in, it's not as tough as the average Joe. So please do not use Joseph as an example to the average Joe going through a trial. It's insulting.
well, on the other hand, you know, separated from your family and
I'm not
going
saying he had an easy
to
time of
a
it.
strange land, and
I'm not saying he had an easy time of it. I'm just saying there is a difference. There was a very clear. He had direct blessings all the time, and he had the prophecy from the beginning. Most people, I'm just talking about the average Joe. Most people don't have this sense of, I'm going to go places necessarily
but
in this
we
physical life
but we
like
have the
that.
scriptures and the promises there.
In the afterlife, I'm talking about in this physical
I see. Yeah, good point.
life.
So he says, uh, hello, where are we? Lelohim Pitzonim aren't no interpretations belong to God.
Yes.
So he doesn't take credit as the interpreter. I mean, they give him credit,
Yeah.
but he says God has given me this gift,
Right.
and that's of course Daniel's situation later,
Right.
and that puts Daniel in a, so Joseph is like his situation very much mirrors Daniel's later.
Right.
You know,
But the important thing is he does pass the Deuteronomy test because he tells them something is from God and immediately it does actually happen. Just keep that in mind.
yeah, right, okay,
Because
and same with Daniel,
lots of people will claim gifts from God and then there's no proof.
right, right.
There should be proof.
And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. And it's not that I came up with this, but you have uniquely in the Bible 4 righteous generations: Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph.
Uh-huh.
Now I don't know how Joseph's children turned out, one way or the other, but at least we have these 4 heroes of the Bible.
Right.
4 generations, which is not the norm, I would suppose, to have such greatness. 4 people, such greatness
I'm
there.
trying to think. If you just think of years, it's almost never again. I think there's like 70 years in Judges once, and then like Hezekiah's reign's pretty decent. Like, but it's
Well,
not
yeah,
very long, and that's just a few generations, right? And then it goes south.
but
So, so
even if you have a generally, let's say a very
four
powerful,
generations
a
would be a
very
lot. That's
let's
like
say
hundreds of years.
let
Well, with how long these people
right,
lived,
that's true.
yeah,
Even if you have a person who really accomplishes a lot spiritually,
right,
his son may be okay, but
right,
not of the same stature. But here we had 4 really
right,
major figures spiritually,
right. Yeah, because you have like David, Solomon, and then
and then it begins to
yeah,
peter out. Yeah,
right.
right.
And then I can't even think of anybody else that really goes all that far. Usually you don't even get to the next generation where they're that big of a deal. I mean, sometimes, but now some people get all bent out of shape because in chapter 39 it says the prison house warden placed the prisoners, and then in chapter 40 it said the high chamberlain the prison house. And so they're like, well, that's a contradiction. The Bible's wrong. Just throw the whole thing out. I mean, not quite that bad, but I mean, not necessarily. It could just be more information about who the warden was, or maybe there was more hierarchy going on. Like, don't get bent out of shape over that.
Okay, I hadn't
Yeah.
thought of that as an issue till just now.
Because it's not. But I'm
Okay,
just saying, some people say that. Okay. Um, Here's an interesting thing. Again, we have Joseph as the parallel of Jesus Christ, and you have bread and wine. Kind of interesting, right? Because you have
Oh,
the
yeah.
bread, the baker, and the cupbearer. That's kind of fun. You also have 3 days. Also kind of fun as well. So
Right.
that's interesting. Um, it is kind of interesting to some extent that they would have find these dreams so puzzling. They seem rather obtuse because it's like there were 3 vines and then I crushed it and put it into Pharaoh's cup. It's like it seems, if you think it's a prophetic dream, it seems to imply, I don't know, perhaps you're going to give wine to Pharaoh again because that's what you did before. Maybe you wouldn't get to the 3 days thing, like what the threes, maybe you think it's 3 years, 3 months, but I don't know. It doesn't seem like a big leap. It's kind of interesting that he seems so puzzled.
Yeah, well, he didn't know. Well, he's in jail right at the moment,
Yeah,
so
that's true.
yeah.
I mean, if you think of it as like the whole parables thing, it could be that the information was obfuscated from him for no reason, except he would have to ask Joseph about it.
Well, I think that he was just unsure, after what he'd been
Possibly.
through, after what he'd been through.
Yeah. Now it doesn't say it says that they stayed a good while after under guard is what it says, right? So these were people that he kind of knew about, and so I think it is interesting when they said, we dreamed a dream, there's no one to solve it, and then he says, are not solutions from God. I wonder whether or not, I mean, not that I necessarily think of Joseph as like an obnoxious proselytizer or something, but it could be that they did know that he believes in that God, and basically he's kind of chastising them for saying, well, if you didn't know who could interpret your dream, why didn't you ask me? Don't you know that I have this relationship, and something like that. It could be that's kind of what he's getting at when he says that.
Yeah, he might be influencing them to some degree,
Hmm.
spreading the word as it will.
Right, but I mean, I don't think this was the first time he ever mentioned God necessarily, because he's like, because at least the way this is translated, it's like, are not solutions from God. It's almost like, yeah, you know that guy I was talking to you all this time that created morality and stuff. Like,
Right.
maybe he has the answers. Did you
Good
think about
point.
talking to me about this? Because he's like, why are you so upset? And then they tell him, and then he's all like, well, you tell me, right?
He very likely told them that even though he was incarcerated, but he had faith because he did have a relationship with God that things would work out. Maybe he told them that.
Yeah.
That I'm not that depressed because I do believe that something's going to come out of this. Maybe.
Right. Now, what's interesting is he said, I was stolen from the lands of the Hebrews, and I have done nothing that I should have been put into the pit. So, according to him, his thought is that he has done nothing wrong up to this point, which is interesting. Is it? Now,
Yeah.
there's 2 different ways I can look at it. Okay. One is that he's basically saying he hasn't done anything wrong at all. But there's
No.
also, he's done nothing that's deserving of his
Of course.
adverse reaction. Okay.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
All right. I'm just saying. I'm not saying he was trying to say he was sinless. I'm just saying that, you know, he was, he might have. So this doesn't preclude the fact that perhaps some of his behavior up until now could have been savvier. This is what I'm saying. It doesn't preclude that.
Yeah. You could make misjudgments. That's not the
Yes.
same as sinning.
Well, it's also not the same to make
Making
a
an error.
misjudgment that's worthy of that either.
Yeah. You could invest in the wrong
Right?
business or something.
Just being a little foolish or whatever is not quite the
Right. You
same
could
thing.
put yourself in a
Even
situation.
if he was prideful, is that really worthy of this? No.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Right.
now, What's interesting at the end of this is we get to the third day, Pharaoh's birthday, and he makes a feast and all of this. And this is one of just a few situations where you see a birthday mentioned in the Bible. And for sometimes people, because of the negativity connected to it, it does weird them out in terms of celebration of birthdays. However, I would say in this specific example, it's kind of mixed because a positive thing happens and a negative thing happens. So I would say this example in of itself is not really an indication of much of anything. This example in of itself is what I'm saying. Because you have somebody getting promoted and somebody getting killed, and it seems completely unrelated to the birthday.
Well, I would disagree with that. I mean, there are two major examples in the Bible of birthdays are this one, and then in Mark 6 and elsewhere, where John the Baptist is
Oh no,
beheaded.
that one is horrible. I agree with you, but I don't think
But
this specific
this is bad. I
example.
mean, if somebody's promoted, but somebody else is killed,
Yeah, which means it's neutral.
it's not. It isn't neutral because he was in jail, but he wasn't being tortured there or whatever.
Well, we don't know what he did.
What
The baker, maybe he was trying to murder the pharaoh or something.
no,
We don't
but
know. We don't know if this was unjust.
yeah,
He might have been a wicked person.
well, okay. Now that is a good point.
We don't know.
In other words, it maybe his execution was justifiable.
Perhaps.
Yeah, that. Well, if that's the case, though, why would he have waited that long to do it? Why didn't he do it
Why
right
did he
away?
wait so long anyway? I don't know why that makes any difference. What if he had been a good person? Why would he wait that long? Why did he decide to do it that day of all days?
I'm saying it was part of the celebration.
Part of the celebration is just to kill a random person? I mean, I wouldn't think just a random person.
Well, he was a prisoner, so he obviously had something against him.
Right. So that might be the timing of why you would execute somebody, which is maybe a little tacky.
All right, yeah, maybe that.
Because it's his birthday, so he's showing he's in charge or
Yeah, he
whatever.
may have waited
But
for.
maybe it was
Maybe
justified.
he waited for his birthday to carry
Yes.
out justice.
Right.
It's my birthday, and I'm going to make a decision.
Sure.
Yeah, it could be.
Possible.
Could be.
All I'm saying is this specific example is not a good one. The John the Baptist one, fair enough, but this one is not.
I have heard this one used though.
I agree. I know I have. I just don't think it's very compelling to me.
Oh, okay, all right.
It feels just like anything else. Like, I don't know, like,
Okay.
It does tell you one thing. I will say for people that are not particularly keen on birthdays, that it does tell you that the pagans celebrated birthdays and we don't particularly have any recollection of the Israelites doing it up to this point. And really, it's never mentioned. It's mentioned in Job, but even then, it's kind of sketchy because he doesn't want to go to his kids' birthdays, right?
And
It's
we
not
don't
really
know,
clear what's going on.
and we don't know if their birthday's there.
Oh, it's like celebrations for themselves, right, or
We
something.
we don't
It's
know
kind of
exactly.
vague.
Yeah, it might be, but we don't know.
Okay, but anyway, it does tell you that this was a practice they do, and you don't see it mentioned of the other, which could make you concerned. However,
tradition.
we do know that they tracked their years because we
Yeah.
know when they died.
Yeah, of course.
So they had to do that somehow.
Well, yeah, and I was going to mention that the important thing in Jewish culture
Yep.
is to observe the anniversary of somebody's death, and we do that with Jesus Christ too. You know, we celebrate the anniversary of his. We commemorate
Mm-hmm.
the anniversary of his death, the
Right.
14th day of the first month.
Right.
And the Bible doesn't say when he was born.
Right. The Bible doesn't say when anybody's born, but the Bible does say when people die. Occasionally, not always. You do get some dates.
Yeah, there's a general sense of when Isaac was born, because of that is rare. But then
There's some exact dates for some people's deaths, though.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. There are some.
But we never get an exact date of a birthday.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's another indication
Yeah.
about what biblical culture could look like. So
My grandparents came out of Eastern Europe, traditional Jewish life in Eastern Europe. They weren't necessarily religious people, but they weren't even sure when their birthdays were.
yeah. Now the last sentence of this chapter is really the sad one, and it's just a sad statement of humanity. where, after doing all this for somebody and Joseph tells him to remember him, and then it just says, nope, he didn't. And this is going to be repeated later with Egyptians altogether, right? Because the entire Joseph's going to save the entire nation, and then the Pharaoh is not going to. It's going to say it's something to that effect, right?
Right.
They did not know
A
Joseph or
new
something,
pharaoh comes along, and
right? Who doesn't know what? No, right? Because it's not passed on. And this goes to show how the Bible is giving us the principle of history, and it's not just biblical history, but the idea that you do need to pay attention to what people have done for you and things like that. That is a principle that is brought through the Bible.
I'd like to make a point here on the 23rd verse.
Don't lose knowledge.
It,
Oh yes.
it just says, he didn't remember Joseph. You could translate this, but there's a copula, vav, which literally means and, but it's used all kinds of ways
Mm-hmm.
in biblical Hebrew, where they weren't that precise
Uh-huh.
in that particular way, whereas in English we're more precise. So here, but is probably better than just to say and.
Yeah. Robert Alter said no.
Yeah, but
But the
Robert
chief
Alter,
cupbearer did not remember Joseph. No, he forgot him.
he goes beyond what really the text
Oh,
says.
okay. You think so?
He wants to make it
It's a bit
because
overreach.
no, it's dramatic and it does convey the thought.
Uh-huh.
In Hebrew it just says he didn't remember him, but he forgot him, and it's very terse. But when you read it, it's dramatic to say he didn't remember him, but he forgot him. So the word "no" in there
Well, but would
brings
be,
out the drama.
but the but would be a weird English construction because but usually implies contradiction.
Well, it is. He didn't remember him. Oh, I see. He did remember him, but he forgot him.
Right.
Yeah. So really, "no" is better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
No,
did not, because like a double negative.
Yeah, but yeah, you're right.
Did not remember him.
No is
No, he
actually
forgot him.
well,
I think
no is actually better.
I think that's
Once
better.
again, Robert Alter scores. Okay.
I just think so.
Wow. Yeah. Wow.
This is a Bible study, not a
Now
literary
I'm not
society.
getting any. I guess he's still alive, and I'm not getting any commission from him, nor is
Is
Daniel.
he? I guess.
I think he's still
Wait,
alive.
let me look that up.
Anyway,
I think so.
and we're promoting his material, and that's even though he's not a religious man, but we're promoting his. He certainly respects the Bible,
Yeah, yeah.
and
He's still
we're promoting his
he is
material.
still alive.
Good. All right.
Uh,
Good. Well, maybe he'll see these sometime, and he'll realize we're
he's
promoting.
fairly old though. He's like
Uh,
90.
yeah, I would. Well, yeah,
So
because I was reading his stuff in the '70s.
yeah.
Um, but
This translation that I'm reading, by the way, was finished in 2018, so
yeah,
it's fairly hot off the presses in terms
right.
of biblical
Yeah, in other
material.
words, it's almost a century of Bible
Yes,
knowledge.
it's his magnum opus.
Right.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
been working on this for a long time.
Right. Yeah. And he took a lot of abuse from
People
liberals.
like you. No.
No, the opposite.
I
He
know.
took a lot of abuse from people who felt like he was being too respectful
Mhm.
of the Bible.
And he does have a lot of notes about, potential contradictions or things like that. And he tries to deal with them.
Yeah,
He tries to be nice.
He's not he's not one he's not an Orthodox Jew is what I'm saying. And just because he was really showing the beauty of the Bible as literature, he was getting attacked by certain more
Yeah,
cynical
I want
types.
to minimize it to childish or
But
something.
there are a lot of academics who really diligently study the Bible,
Sure,
even though they're quite hostile to religion.
they should.
I had one like that.
Yeah, my
Uh,
wife did too.
I had a man who his life was involved with the Bible. He was an expert on the Dead Sea Scrolls,
Right.
and he very much was involved with Bible study.
Yeah.
That's what he did.
Right.
But if you heard his views on religion, whoa, So anyway,
Well, it's not a religion; it's a relationship. Okay, we're not going to go there.
yeah.
Please don't. Okay. Any other thoughts about this chapter?
This is really the conclusion then of these 7 parts.
It is.
So
It is, in fact.
So
This is the end of the week.
We're left with him as a VIP, but in jail, and he's forgotten for the time being.
I know, right? Isn't that a nice little cliffhanger for next week?
Right, yeah. Okay.
So next week we will discuss it. In the meantime, You can listen to Go Go Joseph from Joseph and Chad Amazing Coco Dream Code. Never listened to it before. It's a good song. Go Go Joseph, you know this. It's definitely the best song in the show. So anyway, check it out on Spotify.
There's one song that I think Joseph sings maybe when he's in prison,
Mm-hmm.
and it has more of a Jewish flavor to it.
Mm-hmm.
And a Hasidic singer,
Mordecai Ben David.
yeah,
Yeah.
he
He
turned
took it. Yeah.
he took the melody and
Yeah.
and did a Yiddish song to it.
That's right.
And you'd think that it was maybe a traditional Hasidic song, but actually the original melody came from
Andrew Lloyd Webber.
from this musical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Andrew Lloyd Webber can write Jewish sounding songs. Surprisingly enough. I mean, the whole score is a pastiche score of Joseph. You have Elvis music and country music and the French song.
And again,
that's like the whole shtick.
We're not getting any commission from him either.
Definitely not. And neither am I 100% endorsing of that show. But I do like Go Go Joseph. It's a really what they call a banger number. It's really good. So check it out on Spotify. And in the meantime, subscribe, hit the bell, and we'll see you tomorrow.